Right now, Alaska is still Alaska, but World War III is near. 3 NATO countries are strengthening their presence in the Black Sea, while Russia is losing equipment and ships loaded with ammunition. The West has decided to finish off Russia. NATO is on the brink of war. Ukraine has backed Moscow into a corner. Azov is encircling the occupiers. The Ukrainian armed forces are at the borders of the Russian Federation. Moscow is in shock. A nuclear strike, Orishnik, and dangerous maneuvers during exercises in Belarus. The nuclear threat is already underway. Who will press the button? Shock? Putin's secret project, a hybrid missile from Ukraine, the USA, and China. The Kremlin's Sky Monster. The new weapon is already in action. But the Ukrainian armed forces have prepared a powerful response. An incredible strike at the heart of the Russian Federation's military machine. Ukrainian drones broke through the defenses and destroyed strategic targets. Warehouses are burning, factories are collapsing, chaos is everywhere. You have to see this panic. D-Day, 5 possible endings to the war, from a nightmare for Europe to the complete defeat of Russia. Everything will be decided soon. All this and more in our program, Hotspot. NATO is on the brink of war. Romania, Bulgaria, and Turkey are strengthening their fleets in the Black Sea. Putin is in a panic. A Russian Su aircraft was shot down near Snake Island. The Ukrainian armed forces are destroying the port with Shahed drones. NATO is preparing to strike. A living nightmare for the Kremlin. Watch all the explosive details right now.
Ukrainian drones have struck the 4th Russian oil refinery in a week. After fires in the Komi Republic, Saratov, and Krasnodar Krai, the Syzran oil refinery has also caught fire. I got it on
Another one?
Another one is coming. There's absolutely no internet connection available, and the entire plant is currently burning down in a catastrophic blaze. And on the local Samara news channel, we are watching something quite unbelievable, something like a live report of this unfolding disaster.
In the Samara region, there are about 30,000 representatives of the Moldovan ethnic group.
Mordvins.
In this way, the Ukrainian defense forces are minimizing the ability to supply fuel and lubricants directly to Russian army units involved in active combat operations on Ukrainian territory. I would like to point out the recent drone strikes by the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine on the oil refinery in Ukhta, 2,000 kilometers from the line of contact. Previously, the maximum range for striking targets on Russian territory was 1,500 kilometers.
Ukrainian defense forces also struck a Russian vessel in the Astrakhan region carrying components for Shaheds and ammunition from Iran.
This operation effectively nullifies the possibility of a full production cycle, that is, the assembly of unmanned aerial vehicles for strikes on Ukrainian territory. This is about carrying out a preemptive strike, a proactive measure on UAV assembly sites in order to prevent the significant scaling up of strike drone production and their deployment.
Another piece of good news, the Russian army has lost a Su-30SM fighter jet which crashed near Snake Island.
We also cannot rule out the possibility that it was shot down by the Ukrainian side. At this point, we can confirm the loss of another Su-30SM, and just for context, the cost of such an aircraft is about $35 to $50 million. And notably, the Russian Federation's military-industrial complex is only capable of producing a maximum of 8 to 10 of these aircraft per year.
Mandatory evacuation of families with children has begun from Drushkivka and 4 villages in the Donetsk region. Experts state that the situation is difficult but under control.
At the moment, unfortunately, the Russian occupiers control the commanding heights in Toretsk and Chasiv Yar, which allows them, including with the use of tube artillery, not to mention rocket artillery, to keep residential neighborhoods, including those in Drushkivka, under total fire control. Regarding the line of contact, there has been no breakthrough by the occupiers in the Drushkivka direction.
3 NATO countries will increase their presence in the Black Sea due to the threat from Russia. Romania, Bulgaria, and Turkey will create a joint demining group.
In the coming years, this project will have to be expanded into a patrol project. We will discuss this with our allies in the near future. We must stand up to Russia and protect our interests, namely our energy infrastructure, maritime trade, and freedom of navigation. These are our objectives, and they will be defended.
Putin held consultations with Kim Jong-un before the talks in Alaska. According to the head of the main intelligence directorate, Budanov, North Korea is preparing to send additional troops to Russia, as well as up to 100 pieces of military equipment, including battle tanks and armored personnel carriers.
Pyongyang will send military engineering units totaling 6,000 servicemen to clear mines and carry out restoration work in the Kursk region in the coming months. Some of them may indeed be involved in demining and building fortifications, but will all of them actually do this?
This is an element of informational pressure on the United States, intended to demonstrate that the Russian Federation has military political allies who, accordingly, can provide both military technical assistance and deploy military contingents to the territory of the Russian Federation. Their main task is to free up the operational reserves of the Russian army, which, thanks to the successful actions of the Ukrainian defense forces, are blocked in the Kursk region.
As a result of the meeting in Alaska, Russia wants to take Ukrainian territories without a fight, territories whose occupation would otherwise take several years.
The Russian Federation will always try to push its own agenda, namely full control over the territory of the Luhansk and Donetsk regions. I do not rule out that the Russian Federation will also demand control over the Kherson and Zaporizhzhia regions. The position of the United States is directly opposite. Moreover, the position of the United States is the demarcation line, that is, the line of separation along the line of contact. There is no talk of full control over the Donetsk region.
No matter how much Putin tries to threaten and blackmail, it is clear that it is becoming increasingly difficult for Russia to continue this bloody war. The only question is, to what extent is Putin willing to ruin his own country?
The front is on fire. The Ukrainian armed forces have reached the borders with Russia. The Kremlin is in panic. Azov is tearing the enemy to pieces. The occupiers' breakthrough in Donbass has been destroyed. The Ukrainian armed forces are boiling the Russians in a cauldron. A third of Sumy region has been liberated. Ukraine is reclaiming its lands. Crimea is in terror. Russia is redeploying troops from other directions. The Ukrainian armed forces are pushing through relentlessly. Moscow is losing control over the front.
Russia has broken through the Ukrainian armed forces' defensive line. The command is reassuring everyone, saying it's just a few sabotage and reconnaissance groups. Western analysts are already speculating about what the loss of the entire Donetsk region would mean. Meanwhile, Ukraine launched a counteroffensive in the Sumy region and recaptured a third of the occupied territories. All the latest frontline news right now. The Russians made a sudden breakthrough at the front ahead of the Putin-Trump meeting. This was reported by the Wall Street Journal. The occupiers found a gap in the Ukrainian defenses and then used their massive manpower reserves to break through. This refers to the salient in the direction of Dobropilya in the Donetsk region.
Now, naturally, Russian forces will try to take advantage of this moment, attempting to consolidate their position, send in additional reinforcements, more troops, and possibly even equipment. And right now, probably in the next few days, the Ukrainian armed forces have a chance to somehow contain this breakthrough, maybe cut off the units that broke through by liberating territory at the very base of this breach, or start attacking from different directions and take, say, all the villages, all the settlements along the way, so that there's nowhere for them to hide and so on.
At the same time, military analysts report that the Russian Federation does not control the entire territory that the assault troops managed to pass through. Most likely, during the breakthrough, they were moving in light vehicles, and at this point, it cannot be said that the enemy has managed to gain a foothold and take control of the entire salient.
For now, there are only sabotage and reconnaissance groups there. These are irregular troops. These groups are dangerous because they are highly mobile. They will try to seize vehicles in order to infiltrate further. But it should also be remembered that Russian forces constantly use this tactic of small groups to accumulate at certain positions and then advance further.
The Ukrainian command has already responded to the Russian breakthrough. It is reported that as reinforcements, the most combat-ready National Guard units from the Azov battalion have been deployed to this area, and those very same small assault groups have already felt their presence keenly.
We tried to move in as groups, but they hit us hard, and now we still can't get back out.
Also commenting on the situation, the spokesperson for the Dnipro military group confirmed the Russians' local success, but noted that it was a matter of about a dozen soldiers who managed to slip through the line of contact and were pinned down in fighting wherever they managed to reach.
It's not about them taking control of this territory. What actually happened is that a small number of Russians, between 5 and 10 people, managed to sneak in. And this is absolutely not how it looks on the map. It's not that they took control of the entire route they traveled. They made their way through and tried to hide in a basement.
At the same time, experts note that Pokrovsk itself, the city that all these encirclement efforts are aimed at, and which is located somewhat south of the breakthrough site, has been holding out quite confidently despite constant heavy assaults.
Overall, if it weren't for this very breakthrough near Dobropilya right now, I would say that the situation has somewhat stabilized over the past 2 weeks. That is, the Russian troops had been acting actively up until then, but at Rodinsky they really hit a serious obstacle. And for a couple of weeks now, there have been heavy battles there, but they haven't been able to advance. So basically, the defense of this sort of semicircular salient is holding quite confidently, I'll say that cautiously, from the perspective of the Ukrainian armed forces. Of course, these are heavy battles. As I've already mentioned, there are a lot of Russian forces there, they're constantly attacking, but nevertheless, we're not seeing any kind of collapse or crises.
The situation is also tense north of Pokrovsk. There, the Russians have become active again in the Lyman direction. However, after several days of intensified attacks, apart from dozens of assault troops killed, Russia has gained nothing here.
Right now, we are observing a significant increase in military movement within the strategic area of the Serebrensky forest, which is primarily a heavily forested region. Essentially, this heightened activity represents a clear attempt to advance southward with the ultimate objective of reaching the city of Sloviansk. Will the enemy succeed in this? Will our forces find the necessary reserves? Well,
I don't know. In principle, we do have forces that can, at least hold back the enemy's advance.
Monitoring channels are also reporting Russian activity in Crimea. Equipment is currently being transferred there from the Moscow and Leningrad military districts, with the possibility of further deployment to the Zaporizhzhia direction or near Pokrovsk. However, in recent months, for Russia, using armored vehicles in assaults has become a major luxury, so the entire operation could end up being just a bluff.
Some of the equipment is more or less available, meaning it can even be moved back and forth just to distract attention. We can't rule out that possibility either. At the moment, yes, the Russian forces haven't set any particularly difficult tasks for the Ukrainian armed forces specifically on the Zaporizhzhia front in Zaporizhzhia region. That is, yes, there have been some local attacks there. Maybe they'll try to create some more serious tension, including to force reserves to be redeployed from the Pokrovsk direction so that there simply aren't enough forces everywhere.
But on the Sumy direction, it's the Russians who don't have enough forces. According to President Volodymyr Zelensky, in the Sumy region, the Ukrainian armed forces managed to retake a third of all captured settlements, which is 6 out of 18. In 2 locations, according to Zelensky, the defense forces even reached the border with Russia.
They can't even properly hold on to these territories. It's not the first village already. Some have been cleared, some have been liberated. Yes, 2 settlements have been freed. Fighting is still ongoing for Alexeyevka, so the Ukrainian military is gradually, of course, within their means. It's clear they don't have a large number of reserves, but nevertheless they are reducing this bridgehead. It isn't expanding, on the contrary, it's gradually shrinking. All of this is because, for example, during the invasion of the Sumy region, Russian troops are not using heavy equipment, making it much harder for them to defend.
The defense forces are also holding their positions in the Zaporizhzhia region and have advanced 1 kilometer deeper into enemy positions in Luhansk.
Shocked, Belarus and Russia are launching Orishnik. The nuclear regime has been activated. Moscow and Minsk are baring their teeth. Are the West 2025 exercises just a cover, or is a nuclear strike inevitable? Watch all the details right now.
Russia and Belarus, during the joint West 2025 exercises, are planning to practice the use of nuclear weapons and Orishnik.
Of course, we plan to work on issues related to planning the use of nuclear weapons. For us, this is an important element of strategic, above all, deterrence. As for Orishnik, the head of state has already spoken about it more than once. All decisions have been made, the location has been determined, and work is underway. Well, of course, as part of our West exercise, together with our Russian colleagues, we will also work on planning the use of this type of weapon.
That's an interesting statement, considering that just a month ago, both Putin and Lukashenko said that the first Orishnik installation might only appear in Belarus at the end of the year.
The first thing I want to say in this regard is that we have produced the first serially manufactured Orishnik system. The first serial missile. Yes. And it has been delivered to the troops. Now the production line is up and running. That's the first point. Second, our specialists, both Belarusian military experts and Russian ones, have chosen the site for future positions. Work is currently underway to prepare these positions, so most likely we will resolve this issue by the end of the year.
Well, we're not rushing, we're proceeding calmly. There's no need to rush ahead.
We both understand perfectly well that even if they have started serial production, as Putin said during that meeting on the bench, it only happened just recently. So there aren't and won't be any large quantities of this Orishnik, because again, our intelligence and military experts say that it's more of a one-off product.
There are actually a lot of stories connected to Orishnik and Belarus coming straight from Lukashenko himself. At one point, he claimed he didn't know that the components were being made in Belarus, then Lukashenko boasted that he would personally decide when to press the button.
You probably noticed that my only condition for Putin was this: we in Belarus will determine the targets, not the Russians. But you'll help us operate it since we don't know how yet. So we'll be pressing the button together, God forbid if it ever comes to that. But we will be the ones to determine the targets. He agreed.
On the one hand, the first internal propaganda goal is being addressed. Look, we're surrounded by enemies, but we have a very powerful weapon called Orishnik. So don't be afraid and stick with me with Lukashenko, and everything will be fine for you. And the second propaganda objective is aimed at the external audience, which the Belarusians are now carrying out, essentially trying to scare Western countries.
The most interesting thing is that the upcoming Zapad 2025 exercises are being presented as very safe and even peace-loving.
There are currently more than 30 military attaché representatives in our country, 9 of whom are from NATO countries. They will also have the opportunity. We are inviting all of them to observe our exercises. In doing so, we once again emphasize our peacefulness and openness and the fact that we truly want to reduce this military tension, which unfortunately we see and feel. As they say, we are taking the first step.
Even Lukashenko himself directly refuted the rumors about where that supposed attack was being prepared from.
We proved to all of them that we are not planning to attack you and that we will be conducting the exercises in the center, deep inside Belarus.
For what purpose?
The exercises?
Yes, the changes in the exercise plans.
So as not to give you, as I already said, any reason to further accuse us of being aggressors, of planning to attack, at the very least, the countries of Eastern Europe, Poland, the Baltic states, and especially Ukraine.
On the contrary, I would actually interpret this interview and Lukashenko's shifted emphasis as real evidence that such an operation is being prepared by the Russians and that in no way have they, so to speak, abandoned or retreated from carrying it out.
As for the Orishnik, they started off, as they say, on a high note, boasting that it was the most innovative and deadly weapon, threatening to wipe the entire West to dust with it. But everyone can see how it ended, with isolated public statements and zero real results.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Shock! A fiery inferno in the Russian rear. Ukrainian drones have unleashed a true apocalypse on enemy military targets. Everything is ablaze, factories are paralyzed, the Kremlin is in panic. Operation Retribution, Ukrainian drones are tearing the Russian Federation's military infrastructure to pieces. These shots have taken the internet by storm.
Please do not be afraid at all.
What is this? What's going on?
Huh? It's nothing to worry about.
Ah!
Are they flying? Where? Where are they flying to?
Fires at factories and closed airports. That's how August began in Russia. Intensity and effectiveness. Every day, Ukrainian forces strike Russian military targets or defense industry enterprises and report successful attacks on unique defense plants in Russia. These attacks have exposed problems within the Russian Federation's military-industrial complex and caused panic among Russians.
I'm losing it, man. My health is shot. What should I do? Let justice prevail! Oh, Lord, we need to get out of here!
Thanks to the Ukrainian Defense Forces, the only Russian plant producing helium for rockets in Orenburg was hit. Local residents reported a series of explosions. The M5 highway was blocked. The Orenburg helium plant processes up to 15 billion cubic meters of gas per year and produces helium, which is critically important for rocket engineering as well as the space and aviation industries. Helium plays a key role in rocket launches. This plant is a vital facility for the Russian military-industrial complex directly involved in the aggression against Ukraine. In Yaroslavl, a major fire mysteriously broke out in the building of a paint and coatings company that produces materials for Russia's military-industrial complex. Another strategically important enterprise was attacked in Tatarstan. The distance from the state border with Ukraine is more than 1,000 kilometers.
Damn! Oh, damn!
UAVs reached the workshops in Yelabuga. Here, on the territory of Alabuga, is the headquarters of the company that manufactures combat drones. In 2024, the plant significantly expanded the production of Iranian-designed strike and reconnaissance drones, using Chinese components and recruiting Russian teenagers for work. The defense forces gave Stavropol's Monocrystal an explosive night. Monocrystal specializes in the chemical industry, producing synthetic sapphire for optoelectronics, which is used in military equipment.
It's going. They hit it, yes, they hit it. They hit the oil depot. Here's our strike. Russia. That's it, folks.
Monocrystal also produces silicon carbide, which is used in armor protection, radars, and military electronics. Monocrystal fulfills state defense orders for the Russian Federation. Eyewitnesses recorded smoke on the factory grounds. The official authorities confirmed the drone threat, but did not provide information about damage to the plant.
It's flying! It's flying! It's firing! At both of them!
In Arzamas, Ukrainian drones attacked the instrument-making plant.
One of the country's leading enterprises in the defense industrial complex with a 60-year history. The plant produces devices for the aviation, missile, and space industries.
The Arzamas plant produces gyroscopic instruments, control systems, onboard computers, as well as key components for the Kh-32 and K-101 cruise missiles. In 2020, the plant was awarded the National Golden Idea Prize in the field of military technical cooperation. The plant is under sanctions from the US and the European Union. Before the successful attack, a note appeared on the Vysota resource, which is dedicated to news about the military-industrial complex, stating that the plant had acquired new equipment. Now, the press service of the Arzamas instrument building plant is sending out letters in public forums demanding that no one write about the attack, even threatening consequences. Russian defense industry enterprises working for the war against Ukraine are absolutely legitimate military targets. Successful attacks by Ukrainian forces help reduce the military capabilities of the aggressor country's army. The work to demilitarize facilities that produce weapons for terrorizing peaceful Ukrainian cities continues and is becoming increasingly intense.
Urgent. Putin has released a hybrid monster into the sky. Shock. The Kremlin has copied the Ukrainian Hell and the American Storm Shadow, not without China's help. What threat does Putin's deadly weapon pose to the world? Watch right now.
Russia has a new cruise missile, the first of its kind for the occupying army. It has already been used against Ukrainian territory.
One cruise missile, a jet-powered drone, a parcel headed toward Mykolaiv from the south.
These reports appeared on the morning of August 7th, but it wasn't a parcel at all. By the way, it's also a new addition to the occupier's arsenal. But this was something even newer. Later, another Telegram channel published images of the downed missile.
Almost every country in the world has a cruise missile that can be launched from under the wing of tactical aircraft and strike targets over 500 kilometers away. Russia did not have such a missile. That's why it was important for them to develop such a weapon. And naturally, it was bound to appear or has already appeared.
The first thing that caught everyone's eye was that, externally, the new Russian cruise missile looks like a scaled-down version of the British-French Storm Shadow cruise missile.
After we have successfully utilized Storm Shadow missiles on Russian territory, after we have deployed ATACMS, after we have employed our very own cruise missiles, which we consistently use for precision strikes, whether it is a drone missile or some other similar type of munition, that is, they had the opportunity to acquire certain technological capabilities because, again, I'll say that Russia doesn't know how to invent something, but it does know how to copy or to scale and modernize it. So here, I would say that most likely they received some clarifications on the issues where they couldn't make progress. And thanks to this, they created a tool with which they now want to actively strike Ukrainian territory.
The specifications of the new Russian cruise missile are unknown, but it is noted that it is conceptually similar to the Ukrainian Peklo missile. The latter has a range of up to 700 kilometers and can reach speeds of up to 700 kilometers per hour. The warhead of the Peklo weighs more than 50 kilograms, with
consideration of the Chinese jet engine that is installed. That's a separate question, by the way. Russia uses jet engines of Chinese manufacture, so they buy a Chinese engine, install it on this missile, and naturally with such a payload and such weight and size characteristics, speeds of 500 to 700 kilometers per hour are quite possible.
It is also known that the new cruise missile is launched from a drone. Its launch from the Orion drone has been confirmed. In theory, the missile can be launched from tactical aircraft, but so far, no launches from airplanes have been recorded. Among the open questions is, at what stage of development is the Russian cruise missile currently? In
principle, if I'm not mistaken, this may be the third or fourth use of this missile on the territory of Ukraine. So this indicates that they made some modifications, launched it, checked the results, made more modifications, launched it again, modified, launched, checked. Moreover, we understand that they are launching it from the sea, from an area with few radar systems that could effectively detect this missile, especially since it uses low altitudes for its flight. In other words, the principle of classical radar doesn't work here, because classical radar operates from 500 meters and above.
So far, only one thing is clear. Russia has indeed created its first short or medium-range cruise missile, and the frequency of their launches is only a matter of time. We need to be prepared for this.
A bold prediction, the end is near. 5 scenarios for the end of the war that will chill your blood. A catastrophe for Europe or an Afghanistan for Russia. All the shocking details, watch right now.
A nightmare for Europe, an Afghanistan for Moscow, a freeze and territorial losses for Kyiv. Against the backdrop of progress in negotiations between Ukraine, the US and Russia, American media have predicted several possible scenarios for how events might unfold.
5 possible outcomes for the end of the Russia-Ukraine war.
The Kremlin's goal in negotiations with Trump is to buy time, both regarding sanctions and military aid to Ukraine, as well as to establish personal contacts between Putin and the US president. The last thing Moscow is interested in during such negotiations and meetings right now is a ceasefire or an end to hostilities.
We can see it. Putin backed down. Putin understood. Apparently, economists explained to him what it would actually mean to lose the main source of income for the military budget. And most likely, in the medium term, this would lead to a complete economic collapse. That's why, yes, that's why Putin is now trying, let's say, to play many cards at once, deliberately shuffling the card of the Russian-Ukrainian war into the deck.
The least likely scenario, as rightly noted by the American media, is Putin agreeing to an unconditional ceasefire in Ukraine.
Ukraine has expressed its readiness to accept the U.S. proposal for the immediate introduction of a temporary 30-day ceasefire, which can be extended by mutual agreement of the parties, provided it is accepted and simultaneously implemented by the Russian Federation.
Since at least March, the Russian dictator has refused the 30-day ceasefire proposed by the White House, using various false pretexts and formulations.
My conversations with Putin are always very pleasant, very lively discussions, and then that very night the missiles fly. I come home and tell the First Lady, you know, I spoke with Vladimir today, we had a wonderful conversation. And she's like, oh, really? They just struck another city.
Following Putin's predictable refusal to cease hostilities, experts are discussing 2 diametrically opposed scenarios. The first scenario, a nightmare for Europe, will occur if Putin manages to outmaneuver Trump and the US leaves Ukraine one-on-one with Russia.
European leaders do not have a political mandate to enter the war inside Ukraine. Putin advances. NATO cannot provide a unified response. This is a nightmare for Europe and the end of a sovereign Ukraine.
At this crossroads, the balance of power depends entirely on the position of the White House. After all, if military support for Ukraine continues and new significant sanctions are imposed on Russia and its allies, a catastrophe is predicted for Putin. The war with Ukraine will end for Moscow much worse than Afghanistan did.
The motherland is truly proud of you. The motherland sincerely thanks you. The motherland absolutely counts on you for the future.
This was the last night our soldiers spent on Afghan soil.
Massive Russian losses at the front, a shortage of petrodollars, reduced revenues and spending on armaments, and a deepening economic crisis within the country. Kremlin geostrategists have already experienced something similar on the eve of the collapse of the USSR.
The Kremlin may face a moment when its resistance to the banal and minor inconveniences of reality, as well as to the economic hardships of its own people, becomes fatal for it. A similar short-sighted political calculation ultimately led to the fruitless occupation of Afghanistan by the Soviets.
The most likely scenario, according to the media and experts, is the continuation of negotiations accompanied by ongoing hostilities at least until mid-autumn. The US will continue its current course of pressuring Moscow and supporting Kyiv, while Putin is temporarily satisfied with the current equation, the lives of tens of thousands of Russians in exchange for minimal advances across scorched Ukrainian land.
They will keep fighting, the Russians, as long as they have the opportunity until the rainy season begins. But that is in fact around the end of October to the beginning of November, depending on the weather. And then, yes, then they will move on to political agreements along the line of demarcation. I think they will be willing to compromise on their previous demands regarding, say, the 5 regions. At the very same time, yes, indeed, until then, they will make every possible and conceivable effort now to achieve as much as they genuinely can on the battlefield.
At the same time, no progress toward achieving peace is possible without further participation in negotiations by Ukraine and Europe. Putin's dream is a private deal with Trump, as a result of which the war will continue and Washington will turn its back on the European continent.
That's all for now. For more breaking news from the front, tune in to the next episode.